Stress. We all talk about it, we all feel it. But what is it really? Turns out it's way more than just having a bad day at the office. Today, we're going to peel back all the layers of stress, starting with those huge, world-shaking events and zooming all the way down to the tiny, everyday things that just grind our gears. And I promise by the end of this, you'll have a whole new way of looking at what's going on inside your head and your body.
So right off the bat, I want you to think about this for a sec. What are your biggest stress sources? Is it work? Money? Maybe it's that person in traffic who just refuses to use their turn signal. Just keep those things in mind, because we're about to put a name to all of them.
Okay, let's get the official definition out of the way. Stress is our physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral response to things we see as threatening or challenging. The big takeaway here, it's not just a feeling. It is a full-body experience. And it all kicks off with an event, what psychologists call a stressor, that our brain decides is a threat.
Now, this brings us to a really important point that most people miss. Not all stress is bad for you. We're all super familiar with distress, right? That's the bad stuff, the anxiety, the pressure from negative events. But there's another kind called eustress. Think of it as positive stress. It's that jolt of energy that helps you nail a presentation, or the excitement you feel before a first date. We actually need a little bit of it to feel motivated and, honestly, to feel alive.
All right, so to really get a handle on all this, let's start with the biggest picture possible. I'm talking about the big shocks, the kind of events that don't just hit one person, but shake up entire communities, even whole countries.
In psychology, they call this a catastrophe. And what makes it a catastrophe is that it's huge and it's completely unpredictable. These are events so massive they force everyone to adapt while feeling like they're under this immense, overwhelming threat.
Now think about something like Hurricane Katrina or the 9/11 attacks. These are textbook catastrophes. They happen suddenly, they affect thousands, if not millions of people, and they're completely outside of any one person's control.
And the impact of these events is just staggering. It can last for generations. For example, studies have shown that mothers who were pregnant during a catastrophe sometimes saw serious effects on their children, like premature births or developmental issues. It just goes to show you how deep the physical and psychological shockwaves from these events can run.
Okay, so let's zoom in from those massive society-wide events and get a little more personal. How in the world do you measure the stress from the big upheavals in our own lives?
Well, psychologists call these major life changes. And here's the key. The stress doesn't come from whether the event is good or bad. It comes from the adjustment itself. It's the change that forces our minds and bodies to work overtime to adapt, and that process is always stressful.
So to try and actually quantify this, a few researchers back in the 60s came up with this really fascinating tool. It's called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, or SRS for short. And the whole idea was to put a number on how much stress different life events cause over the course of a year.
And when you look at the scale, it's pretty wild. You've got the big ones you'd expect right at the top, right? Death of a spouse is 100 points, divorce is 75. But then, as you go down the list, you see some really surprising stuff. Getting married, that's 50 points. Even going on vacation is 13 points. Why? Because every single one of these things, good or bad, forces you to adjust.
Let's just park on this one for a second. 12. That is the stress value of Christmas. And it's the perfect example of what we're talking about today. Stress is not about good versus bad, it is about change. All the planning, the family dynamics, the travel, the money, our bodies register all of that as stress. We tend to underestimate the stress of happy events, and that's how we can end up totally burnt out during what's supposed to be a joyful time.
Now, researchers figured out pretty quickly that a general scale doesn't fit everyone. So they developed more specific tools. For college students, for instance, there's the College Undergraduate Stress Scale, or you gotta love the acronym, the CUS. Let's look at a few of these. Finals week is a massive 90 points. Yeah, no surprise there. Financial trouble is way up there at 84. But check this out. Getting straight A's is 51 points. This just hammers the point home. Even achieving a huge positive goal creates its own kind of pressure and stress. Again, it all comes back to that adjustment.
So, we've talked about catastrophes, we've covered major life changes. Now it's time to zoom in one last time, as close as we can get. Because sometimes it's not the big earthquake that gets you. It's the constant tiny tremors. It's the death by 1,000 cuts, the daily grind.
Yep, psychologists actually call these hassles. And you know exactly what they are. Being stuck in traffic, spilling your coffee, arguing about what to have for dinner.
Each one by itself is no big deal, right? But their real power is how they add up, day after day after day.
And this image of ripples in the water is the perfect metaphor. Hassles are like these little disturbances. Sometimes they're their own thing, but a lot of the time they're the aftershocks from a bigger stressor. You know, if you go through a major life change like a divorce, the daily hassles of just getting the kids to school can suddenly feel 10 times more intense.
Up to now, we've pretty much only talked about external events, stuff happening to us. But the last piece of this puzzle is all internal. It's not just about what happens, but about how we experience it in our own minds.
And these are three of the biggest psychological stressors. You've got pressure, which is that feeling of urgency from someone else, like a deadline from your boss. You've got frustration, which is that feeling you get when something is blocking you from a goal you want. And then there's uncontrollability. And this one is a really big deal.
This quote says it all. The less control we feel we have over a situation, the more stressed we get. It's that simple. Two people can be in the exact same difficult situation, but the person who feels powerless is going to experience way, way more stress. Our perception of control is everything.
So that brings us to our final thought for today. We've gone on this huge journey, from epic catastrophes all the way down to those tiny daily hassles, and then finally into the feeling of pressure and control inside our own heads. So looking at that whole spectrum, which type of stress do you think has the biggest impact on your life? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.